Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our evening Google Hangout with member of Knesset Merav Michaeli, member of the Labor Party of the Zionist Union in its most recent incarnation. Member of Knesset Michaeli is one of the most senior members now of the Labor Party. She holds the position as the chair of the faction, but that also makes you the opposition whip,
yes.
keeping all of those opposition members in line, and perhaps you can tell us a little bit more what that is like as we get into the conversation.
I can tell you that when I was with Tzvi Negvi, who used to be the coalition whip up until recently, where he became a minister, we were together in a small delegation of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee in Europe, and he'd present us and say, she's the opposition whip and I'm the coalition whip, and we whip each other. So it's really a source for a lot of
good humor.
Yes, Jewish humor.
So and before, you've been now in politics for about 3 years, I think, two terms, 3.5 years, 2 terms. You finished 5th in the Labor primaries. Before that, a journalist, and you did this kind of thing more professionally than I have ever done it. So you'll correct me on the way that a good conversation is led.
I won't.
Let me ask you, I have a lot of folks who are already online. We have a lot of questions coming in.
So thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
We're really grateful and for making time. And the people who are watching, by and large, are people who are actively involved in J Street, people who want to know a little bit more about what's happening in Israel and to get a real flavor of present-day Israeli politics from somebody who is actively in the forefront of it. And one of the things that has been of most interest to the J Street world in recent weeks has been the growing perception here of a divide between the Netanyahu government and the political direction in which the Prime Minister is leading, and where the security establishment is at, and whether or not there's a split between the political and the security leadership. Over the weekend, there was a very long article in Politico by a journalist named Amir Tibon, and he chronicled over the course of, I think, 23 pages worth of, if you print it out, what the 17 people who have served the Prime Minister in top security positions, how 13 of them have come out in some way either critical directly of Netanyahu's leadership or of particular decisions and directions he's taken the country. It certainly seems to us from over here that there's a bit of a divide emerging. Do you sense that that is real on the ground in Israel, and what are the political implications of that?
The answer would be, and I feel like a cliche, but it would be maybe, but no. Because, yes, former security seniors have gone out and criticized right-wing governments for many years now. We've seen the movie The Threshold,
The Gatekeepers.
The Gatekeepers. Yeah. And, you know, all of them, former heads of the Secret Service, Shabak, and coming out and saying this policy is wrong, and that we should go a totally different way. And by the way, I was just mentioning to you the chair of the coalition, the new chair of the coalition, David Bitan.
Yes.
He's a Likud member. He just, I think a week ago, said in an interview, I don't know what it is about the Shabak and the Mossad, the chair of the head of the Mossad and the Shabak, that makes them so leftist.
Yeah.
And of course, we all came out and said, what do you mean what it is? It's reality that they have to deal with, whereas while you are making noise and causing damage. So this is a democracy. So when they are in service, they are being as responsible as they are on the job, but they will not come out against the Prime Minister. And the army or the rest of the security whatever systems, will not come out against the government. And I think it's, it's only fair.
Right, but
this is how it's supposed to work. This is how it should be. There is, though, and you can see this, and this is something that we often mention both publicly and not publicly, is that there's a reverse universe happening in Israel where the responsible part is the army and the crazy, irresponsible is the political level. And that the political level is the one dealing with little tactics and the army is the one thinking strategically. So it's a twisted world, but it's part of the twisted world that we live in Israeli politics.
So just in picking up on the politics, the perception is that the Labor Party.
Can I just add one other thing?
Please.
Please, I'm sorry. I will say that, unfortunately, since Netanyahu has succeeded overwhelmingly in dominating his narrative, then what happens is that each and every one of those senior security guys who comes out and criticizes Netanyahu's policy gets the same attitude as anyone else who dares to criticize Netanyahu's policies, and immediately is labeled as leftist, meaning not really Jewish, not really loyal, not really on our side. And so there is no accumulating weight outside the peace camp or the center-left camp to the what these people are saying.
Is there a way in which this, though, can be a factor in building the security credibility of your party? The Labor Party, at the moment, as the opposition to the government, in the prior election was perceived perhaps as not being able to capture the security mantle. But if all of these former heads of security agencies are coming out and saying that the direction the country is headed is not good for its security, can the Labor Party benefit in some way by capturing the security credibility of these people and their experience?
I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. You know how when they talk about the beauty myth, it's a wash for sexuality. So talking about security as something that generates voting in Israel is a wash for talking about, it's not really about security, because look at Likud or the right today. They too do not, now that Boogie Elon is out, they are left without any general. They have as defense minister someone who has no military or security experience, none whatsoever. His claim for security fame is that he is against Arabs, and that he wants death penalty for bombers or whatever. So it's not really about the security. So the question is not whether we can create credibility on the security side, because the discourse, and it's an emotional discourse, as vote always is about, are we going to give it all up? Are we really on our side? This is what it's about. How can we gain back this credibility? I would urge all of us to remember that there is a large part of the Israeli public that thinks that we are credible already.
Right.
So it's not like, this is a part of the self-cannibalism in the left.
Yeah.
And it's self-beating always. What are we doing wrong? Where are we? We are not all wrong all the time.
Right.
And
that for sure.
Yeah, so
let me just say, we're getting the feedback from people that we are speaking too softly. So it's a very interactive process, and I am receiving your text messages. They can't hear us.
Oh.
So I will do my best to project as strongly as possible. And
so will I.
Excellent. Okay, so I am also, in the spirit of being interactive, one of the questions that came in is, in light of the events that happened in the past few weeks with the government and the departure of Ya'alon and the introduction of Lieberman, Ya'alon's speech in Herzliya, Barak's speech in Herzliya, the question is there a role for a new center party that brings together the center left and the center right as a real alternative, or in addition to the political field that would be helpful in changing the course of the present government? And as loudly as you can.
As I can. There is no shortage of new parties in Israel.
How many parties are in the
Yes.
Knesset? What's the total?
I don't know, 14, 15,
14.
19, I
Yeah.
don't remember, but too many. And we have this phenomenon, which once again, Israelis are already addicted to, of having, give me the new thrill.
Right.
Who's like now the new combination, the new team, the new reality show.
We don't know anything about reality show stars in politics in the States. We know nothing about that.
I know you don't. But
yeah.
we do. So anyway, so it's the same. It's very much the same. I see no benefit in yet another new party. Maybe if it replaces, let alone if it replaces one of
the existing center
ones.
parties.
Yair Lapid, Kachlon, doesn't matter. Then, okay, but generally speaking, I would like to see all of these people who want to replace Netanyahu and who are so understanding of how damaging his policy is, join us to a bigger camp and creating the alternative.
So let me shift. We'll come back, I'm sure, to Israeli politics. There's plenty to discuss always with 14 parties and new ones on the horizon. But in a more somber note, this has not been a good week in terms of terror and the incidents that have taken place. And it is particularly horrible whenever it is young children who are the victims. And so let me just say clearly how strongly J Street condemns these acts of violence.
Rightfully so, of course.
Absolutely,
Yes.
and we join with Israelis in speaking out against this, and we urge others as well to join. But the question that is asked so often by people in J Street is the Israeli government response to this, which is to expand settlement development, how does that advance security, and what can be done to change this dynamic? That the response to these horrific acts is the expansion of something that in a way is part of the situation.
Well, it would have been a very good question to ask if I were part of this, but obviously we are against as much. It's got nothing to do with condemning the terror and the stabbings and the horrible things that take place, but we have always been against expanding the settlements, and definitely as something that is a punishment for terror. But I have to also say something else, Jeremy, we think we need to notice that Netanyahu is not building that much in the settlements, and that is yet part of the folly that is taking place. Nobody talks about how little he really builds in the settlements because he doesn't want to get the heat from the right side of his constituencies. So he sort of manages to hold the stick on both hands all the time. And yet again, it comes back to him not really having a vision of what it is that's going to take place. If it's not the two-state solution, what is it going to be? He doesn't have an answer to this.
Where is public opinion? In the Israeli society now, where do people fall on the issues of the settlements in the West Bank? We see some disturbing data. The Peace Index, which comes out every month or two, I think most recently said that a majority of Israelis would be comfortable with annexing all of the settlements to Israel. And we reached a tipping point in public opinion where the settlement project is now sort of accepted by a majority of Israelis.
I haven't seen these numbers, I admit. First of all, you please keep in mind that Bennett is constantly talking about the annexation. And it's the human thing that we get used to ideas, no matter how outrageous or weird or inconceivable they sound in the at the start. If you repeat something often enough, then it'll become just something that it grows on you. So I think the mere word annexation probably sounds to people more acceptable or regular or something of this sort. Now, for sure, most Israelis, as it is once again human, it does not mean that people are especially ignorant, but they definitely are ignorant about where exactly the settlements are. What does it mean to annex? What does it mean to the two-state solution, future option, and so on and so on. So it's not substantial. That's what I want to say. It's a discourse that is almost detached from reality. So the good part of this is that it can relatively easily be changed when we have a different government, which we will have sooner or later, that does the opposite.
Almost tempting me to go back into Israeli politics, but I will hold off on that and promise to return to it. And let me just invite people to send us the questions that you would like to hear answered, and please feel free to text those or email or include them in the chat. Let me shift from settlements now over to the U.S.-Israel relationship. Obviously, what has happened between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister on a personal level is about that story. That chapter is about to come to an end. We have 6 more months left in the Obama administration, and to the extent that the tensions between the U.S. and Israel were related to the personal relationship, we're about to turn the page to a new chapter. But to what extent do you think that there is a strain developing in the relationship between the two countries that is deeper as a result of the direction in which this Prime Minister is leading the country? Is there an emerging longer-term issue that goes beyond Obama in your perception?
Unfortunately, I think yes. I know, and we all know that what we have, what we all face in campuses in America, not only in America, by the way, also in Europe, the young generation that, young generation who sees Israel as the strong versus the weak, that finds it very easy to define themselves through opposing Israel. I'm sorry. I came here a little sick, so this is the left.
Please have some water if you like.
Say something in the meantime.
Let me remind people, though, in the interim, while we allow Merav to get a sip of water, please do send in your questions and tell us the topics that you're interested in hearing about. I'm excited to see the questions that are coming in, so please do keep them coming. And we're discussing the nature of the strain between the U.S. and Israel and how much it goes beyond the personal between the President and the Prime Minister.
So 2 things. One is the young generation, campuses, all of this phenomenon. And I have to tell you that I think it's too soon to tell, will it really grow to be a deeper and a larger problem? Because these young people will grow up and become adults in key positions and carry this legacy with them? Or will it be, and I'm saying this very carefully and very humbly, or will it be something like the 60s, that sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and then people grew up and became bourgeois, and, life became life. So I'm not sure which is going to happen. And, it also, of course, depends on other things. But I also want to point out one thing. Of course, it has Israel's, this government and previous governments' policies have, of course, responsibility to the way Israel is being perceived. But It's also a matter of this global process of living only on images, very, very shallow, superficial images, and things being very heightened all the time and very immediate. And so it's very easy to not have a more complex picture of the world and reality and go to, black and white, good and bad. So this is one problem that I see as, may grow in the relationship. And the other, and this one is even for me as an Israeli lawmaker, is even more, I would say, burdening, is the Jewish character of the state of Israel. Israel is the homeland of the Jewish people, and as such, must be totally able to accept and conceive all kinds of Jews, all kinds of Judaisms, and right now it is not.
You were telling me you were involved in a caucus that relates to religious pluralism?
Yes, but not only that, I have many legislative initiatives, and I do a lot of stuff on state and religion issues, but given that the vast majority of American Jews today are reforms that cannot get buried in Israel, that are not recognized in many ways that are not the law of return, other than the law of return, this is to me a huge threat on the relationship with America, because the Jewish community in America is such a prominent part of the relationship with the US. And it really seems to me that Israel is compromising this relationship by the relationship that it has with American Jewry. And I think really the duty that we have is to keep Israel as the homeland of the Jewish people. So we must have a secular state that can really have all kinds of Judaisms. So really there our work is cut out for us, and unfortunately there our government is also doing the opposite of what it should be doing.
Right, I mean, and that's, I see that we've got some questions coming in exactly on that. And to what extent is the Israeli public concerned and aware of exactly the issue that you're raising? That's the question that is being asked by Toby. This issue of non-recognition of the Jews who are 90% of American Jewry, only 10% are Orthodox in the United States, 90% are not. And the fact that that 90% is not considered Jewish, is the Israeli public at all aware?
No, it is not. It is not at all aware, because it is not aware, because if you ask Americans about the composition of sectors within Israel,
right,
they will not know too.
Right.
Because people know what's on their soil, and that too in a very limited way, which is okay. It's not their job necessarily to know that.
Mm-hmm.
So by large, Israelis are not aware of that at all. But I will say that, first of all, on one hand, there's a huge majority, if you ask in every poll in Israel, over 80% of the population, which means that it includes religious people,
mm-hmm,
are for civil marriage in Israel.
mm-hmm.
But it's something that is impossible to do politically because of the veto that is taken for granted by the ultra-Orthodox, and not only ultra-Orthodox, but also the Jewish Orthodox. On one hand. On the other hand, we need to remember that part of the narrative that Netanyahu has so successfully managed to dominate is this wedge between Jewish and Israeli, between Jewish and democracy, between Jewish and anything else. And Jewish in Israel is not reformed, because we have so little communities,
mm-hmm,
and so little numbers of reform or conservative. And since there are factors who have an interest in saying reform is not really Jew, it may be problematic, but I'm sure that, once again, it is very easy to change this kind of public awareness and public understanding.
So let me take you back. I had another question. We were discussing the campuses and some of the growing disconnect among the younger generation, and of course the BDS movement immediately comes up when one thinks about what's happening on campuses and the objection to the occupation and to settlement expansion, and many people in this country who are expressing their opposition to occupation are drawn to the BDS movement. And the question that's being asked is, as support for that grows in this country, what's your perception of what that does to the chances for peace? Does it actually, this growing support for the BDS movement, increase the chances that we may one day move toward peace, or does it actually drive it further away? That's from Diane, the question.
First of all, I have to admit, as much as I appreciate J Street and what J Street does, I am not, I do not believe in inviting pressure on Israel. Certainly not as an Israeli, not as an Israeli lawmaker, that's
right.
for sure. I cannot and do not want to invite pressure on Israel. Moreover, we can see that pressure not only does not push us to do what you and I or you would think is the right thing to do, but en contraire would cause us entrenchment. It leads to more and more entrenchment. So at least in the long, even medium term, in the short and even mid-term, I don't see such things as supportive of the peace process or any advancement in this direction, but rather doing the exact opposite.
One of the things that I was having a discussion with somebody.
Sorry to interrupt, but also one needs to say that BDS is really not, it's really not, to a large extent, not legit. It's even morally, it doesn't hold at all.
Well, one of the things I was just going to ask you is it actually a threat at all? I was discussing this with somebody today who, J Street, as you know, is very strongly opposed to the global BDS movement, and the person was saying to me, if you are so actively involved in the fight against BDS, you're actually giving credence to the notion that it's a real threat. And they were saying, look, it's not really that big a threat. That you know, when the Netanyahu team sort of had to give up on Iran as the next great existential threat, they shifted over to BDS as if it somehow took the place of Iran. And they said, you're giving credence to that. Do you view the BDS movement as actually a legitimate threat to the security and the future of the state of Israel, or is it being a bit overblown?
I hear people saying both. I cannot tell you that I know what the true, real answer is. I hear both positions all the time. Those who say it's not at all a problem, it just serves people's political interests. Right. And I hear the opposite, you know, even I don't know anyone who claims that it's a threat in terms of the actual boycott, but in terms of turning people to see Israel as something negative in general, and avoiding Israel as a subject, as a place, not because they know, not because of the details, but just, you know, not having anything, preferring not to have anything to do with Israel. I think there is where the problem is.
Yeah, I think one of the issues for us is that there's a lot of pressure on J Street always to express its opposition to BDS, but for us the real problem is the occupation. The real problem is the ongoing settlement enterprise and the underlying problem that's giving rise to the BDS movement. The BDS movement, there are people in it. There are some factions of it that are anti-Israel. There are some factions that may even be anti-Semitic, but many of the people who get attracted to it are attracted as a way of expressing their opposition to the underlying situation. And so I wonder at times if we are actually blowing the BDS movement into something bigger than it necessarily needs to be by making it such a focus, rather than focusing on the problem that actually needs to be solved.
For sure, when you fight something, you
enlarge it. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, but I do want to make, I think, an important distinction. BDS is not because of the conflict. BDS is anti-Israel and to an extent anti-Semitic. It's not because of. Don't blame in that case. Don't blame the victim. It's important to make this distinction. It's one thing to take responsibility for what we need to do different, and I am the first one that claims and want to take responsibility as an Israeli for the fate of the future of the state of Israel, and I believe that this is what we have to do, but it doesn't mean we have to take responsibility for those who are against us.
Right.
Period. It's an important distinction.
Right. I think it's a really important distinction. Now, another question that has come in from Neil, speaking of this conversation around the boogeymen that are being created, whether it's Iran or BDS, the one this weekend seems to be Facebook. So Gilad Erdan, I think, was leading the charge against Facebook. To what extent? I mean, it seems to be sort of just a series of, is there somebody out there? What is the latest with that, and what's your opinion of what
And
Mr.
once
Erdogan is
again,
doing?
as I am the first one to say that Netanyahu is exploiting the threats on Israel to generate fear and to bring people to manipulate them to vote for him and to do the wrong thing about it, I don't think that Iran can be undermined as a threat.
Right.
And it's not
Right.
a made up.
Right.
As well as Facebook, once again, I think Erdogan, God knows I don't feel comfortable, protecting Gilad Erdan, and I think but let's go to something else, okay? Pornography. Facebook does not allow pornography, period. There is no question or doubt or anything that would be even slightly, remotely suspected of pornography will not be on Facebook. I once posted one of my weekly videos, said something about, I don't know, the word prostitute or something. It was a first against prostitution, and again, it was actually against sex tourism. So it had something of the sort in the headline, and they wouldn't allow us to promote it.
Right.
We had to write to them and get it. So as far as pornography goes, and there's no question, and nobody talks about censorship, and nobody's asking any questions, it's totally acceptable. So why shouldn't it be the same when it's inciting for terror? I mean, we have a totally the same, we are on the same, that is Israel, America, Europe, anyone who's against terror and is exposed to the threat of terror, aren't we on the same side of that? Don't you think it makes sense?
I think that there's definitely an argument. There's, of course, the balance of free speech at all times, right? And so where do you begin to draw the lines in it?
So that's what I'm asking you. Why is pornography, thank God, we are in a place where pornography is not considered to be free speech now, okay? It used to be, not so long ago. So why incitement to terror or terror is considered to be, why do we have this discussion when it's about terror? Seriously.
That is an interesting point, and I think is one valid for discussion. The question of whether or not to turn Facebook into an enemy of the state, though,
This
is
less,
another,
as I said,
yeah.
a less wise thing to do.
Yes, exactly. So, and speaking of attacks on people and organizations, another line of question is that there are very, very serious attacks going on against many of the NGOs in Israel on the left, particularly breaking the silence in some of the more human rights-oriented organizations. Is there anything that the left, the political parties on the left can be doing to help protect some of those organizations from attack, and in order to say they are part of a vibrant political discourse, even if we don't agree necessarily with everything that they do, to help protect them a bit from some of the attacks that they're currently under?
I have to say for myself and many of my colleagues, we are doing our best about this. They are not alone in this, not only in the sense that we are with them mostly on this, but because they are not alone, because they're a part of a larger battle over freedom of speech, democracy, criticism of the government's policy, etc. So it's not, I mean, to isolate the specific attacks on these specific organizations is really artificial. I suffer, you know, take or leave, my colleagues, other factors that are opposing the government and its policies. We have to deal with all kinds of attacks. So it's like we are all together in this, and we try to back each other as much as we can. It's a good place to point out that I think maybe the biggest problem in the center left, the left and the center left in Israel today, and you have some of this here in America now, is the inner cannibalism.
Right.
The fact that we cannot close ranks, and we are so busy, and we've actually internalized in many ways the violence that was inflicted, that is inflicted on us from the right, and we are inflicting it on each other. It became the standard. So we constantly point our fingers at each other and say, you are too leftist, you're not enough leftist, you are a traitor, you are. So it became like a code of loyalty within the left, which is totally devastating for us. So I think, you know, try to work together as best we can is really the most important thing that we should start doing.
So let me shift over to another topic, and it was asked in a question before we even began, which is to look at the Palestinian side of the equation, and just to try to get your sense from, the question is, from here in the US, it's difficult to get a sense of what the Palestinian street is thinking at the moment. The information that we see is often from more right-wing sources that are highlighting incitement to terror and highlighting bad Facebook posts, or highlighting a textbook that may be inciting hate. But the question is, beneath that, what is your, as a Knesset member, an Israeli who has regular interchange with Palestinian civil society and political leadership, what is possible with the Palestinian society today, with the majority of Palestinians support a move that J Street might support, that you might support, towards a two-state solution? Are we losing a majority of Palestinian public opinion? Where, from your perspective, where do things stand in Palestinian society today?
I think the process that is overgoing the Palestinian society is very similar to the one that's going over the Israeli society. We've seen that for too many years now, that we're like a mirror image. There's still, we know that from the numbers and polls, it still is a majority for the two-state solution, also within the Palestinian society. But there is a growing distrust of the possibility of ever getting there. So it's the same that happens in the Israeli society. Now, the same thing goes for the younger generation. On both societies, the younger generation hasn't, you know, they don't remember Oslo. They don't remember that there was ever hope for something else. They only know no hope. They only know failed negotiations and failed peace initiatives and so forth. So why should they have hope for anything? But unfortunately, as I said, it goes both ways. As always, there are factors on the other side that are pro-peace, that are taking initiative, that are partners for civil, you know, joint activities.
Right.
And so, but I, for one, I don't think, once again, on both sides, it sounds weird, but it's not about the public. It's about the political will in the leadership that will decide to go for it. And once, on both sides, but for me, I'm in charge of, you know, the Israeli side, but definitely when leaders on both sides will come and say, we have brought you an amazing deal.
Changes the whole.
It's, yeah.
So let me ask a final question. We don't have any new questions in the queue, and I just want to say thank you to everybody who's been with us, and give you, Merav, a chance to end, because it's an American organization and American conversation. We must end on a note of hope.
Of course.
So my question is, I came back from a trip to Israel about 3 weeks ago, feeling more hopeful and optimistic about the sense that political change might be coming than I have in a while. We just had a bite to eat right before this, and you said that you have a sense in the air that the era of Netanyahu, we may be seeing the signs that we're coming to an end. Help our folks to understand why you think that. Why do you think we're coming to the end of that era? What can give us hope that there's another political era to come in the not too distant future?
So first of all, you know how our impression on people is being determined in the first split of a second.
Yes.
And then you give it words.
Yes.
Right? So it's the same about it. It's a feeling. It's something that I sense. Now I can try and explain it, but it's just as I think you felt the same thing. I mean, once again, you have your own explanation, but it's more of a,
it's in the air.
Something in the air. I don't know where it's going to come from, but there is a growing discontent. We saw this in the last elections. It's not that it wasn't there in the last elections. And also the gap, let's remember, 24-30, and the blocks remain the same. So it's not like, we were all...
Tidal wave.
Yes, exactly. So there is a growing discontent towards Netanyahu publicly. And what you started with, criticism by people from former security. So, and what Barak said, and Bogi said, and so it's none of those are like, but it accumulates. It's just accumulating one over the other, and it looks, and it is, how empires fall when they seem the strongest.
Yeah.
Exactly then they crumble. So I think this is the case. There's also all kinds of, all the deals with the Prime Minister's wife and with the Prime Minister. There is now another investigation with money and I don't know, something with the Prime Minister. This is my feeling. The question is, will we be able to close ranks and work together and believe? Because you know what our huge problem now is, this total lack of confidence on the central left, that we really have an alternative.
An alternative, right.
We need to do, it sounds so Oprah Winfrey, and she's not been on television for too long. So we really need to believe in ourselves. Without this, we can never convince anyone else to believe in us. So just believe in us, and we will believe in ourselves, and we'll do this together.
So I understand you're in Washington, D.C. for an event tomorrow night at the Washington Institute.
12 noon.
12 noon tomorrow at the Washington Institute, right across the street from where we are here in Washington, D.C. Will that be streamed online as well?
Yes,
I'm not sure that will be streamed as
It
well.
is.
It is. Great. So either attend in person or watch online tomorrow. And I just want to say thank you very much to member of Knesset Merav Michaeli. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy.
All right,
It's a
wonderful.
pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.